What's up, everybody? Katie Barrett, online instructor with Show Up Fitness Internship. And as you are reading in How to Become a Successful Personal Trainer Volume 2, we are going to break down the 8 core patterns of movement. Today, we're going to talk about the squat pattern of movement, all right? So I'm going to talk to you about cues, how to find your perfect squat stance, how to help your clients find their perfect squat stance, the agonist, synergist, what we're focusing on to get the most out of our squat. All right, so the agonist muscles are going to be the main movers in a pattern of movement. The synergist muscles are going to be assisting in that core pattern of movement. So let's talk real quick about shin angle and how it's going to relate to the squat. Now, the quads and glutes are both working during a squat, but to what degree depends on the shin angle. For instance, a regular, typical squat that you'll see, the knees are going to travel forward, making this a more quad-dominant pattern. In a sumo squat, when the shins are more vertical, it's going to be a more glute-dominant pattern of movement. It is very important as a qualified trainer that you have mastered this pattern of movement before you try to teach it to anyone else. So if you're not quite there with your squats, make sure that you're working on them so that you are able to confidently and safely teach them to your client. With that being said, there's a lot of stuff going around on the internet about the wrong way to squat, the right way to squat, if the knees cave in, which is called knee valgus, if your knee is traveling forward past your toe, should it stay behind the toe? There's so many different things out there, and I can't tell you which one is right or wrong or which one is better or worse because everybody is different. That is why being an open-minded, qualified trainer is so important, because client A is not going to squat like client B. Client B is not going to squat like client C, and probably none of them are going to squat how you squat. So it's very important to really know the mechanics and the anatomy so that you can safely teach your clients. Now, there's a couple different ways you can use to find your squat stance. One way that I don't use very often just because it tends to make clients dizzy is to have them close their eyes and spin around in 3 circles, and wherever they land is going to be their squat stance. The better way that I have found through experience is having our clients jump, and wherever they land is typically their best squat stance. All right, now, of course, there can be little adjustments made after you observe them squatting to find out what's most comfortable and what's most effective for them. Remember, when you're jumping, you're loading the hands behind you and coming up. Now, we don't have to do a maximal jump. I just want their feet to leave the floor, all right? Now, some things that can differentiate if you have longer femurs, typically a forward stance is not going to be the best stance for someone with long femurs like me. I have very, very, very long femurs. So I find it more comfortable to turn my toes out just a little bit to get the femur out of the way of the pelvis when I go down into the squat. So I'm able to go down pretty far in that squat, as opposed to if my toes are forward and I can only come down to about here. I'll show you from the side, my toes forward, and I stop right about here. This would be uncomfortable to go any further. As you can see, my hip crease is higher than my knee, and most of our clients and most of us are not competing. However, if you are competing, you'll want your hip crease to go below the knee. The only way I can do that with the type of femurs that I have is to turn my toes out. Now you'll see when I go into a squat, I have no problem getting my hip crease below my knee. As I mentioned before, if we're not competing, that's not necessarily the most important thing. However, it is important to get our clients to get through the full range of motion for each joint as much as possible in any pattern of movement. A couple things to look out for when you're taking your clients and teaching them the squat pattern is knee valgus. So the knees are going to be caving in when they're squatting, all right? And when they're squatting, their heels may come off the ground. So now these can be due to a lack of strength, a lack of movement competency. It can be a lack of mobility in the ankles. You really just have to observe this client and figure out, what are they feeling when they're squatting? Does something feel uncomfortable? And how are we going to help this client fix it? It could be as simple as a matter of just learning this movement pattern, or it can be something more complex, like we need to work on mobility either at the hip or at the ankle. Now we're going to break down the most regressed version of a squat and the most progressed versions of squats for your clients. Starting with the most regressed version, we have just a box stand-up, right? So our clients, which I like to use with elderly clients or people who are morbidly obese, you're just sitting on a box or a bench or even a chair, and all you're doing is standing up. Now, when I'm teaching this, I'm teaching my clients to engage their quads, all right? So you're pushing your feet into the floor, and when they get up, they're leaning forward and they're driving through the heel as they come up. Once your client progresses from a stand-up, we're going to do a simple box squat. Taking a lower box or a bench, we're just gonna have them find their, we've already found their squat stance. You're gonna have them lower into the squat, try to touch their glutes to the box, and then stand up. This is gonna offer peace of mind to your client and to you. If they're still not developing that movement competency, they always have the box. Worst case scenario, they can just sit down. So once again, we're coming down in that squat, trying to touch the box. Once they've mastered and feel comfortable with the box squat, we're going to progress to a body weight squat. Typically, I like to have them hold their hands here. Once again, we're lowering down and back up. From the side, we are lowering down and coming back up. They should be able to do this without the knees caving in. We could even cue this exercise by putting, of course with permission, by putting our hands on the outside of their knees. If they don't give you permission, you can always put a band around their legs and cue them to drive their knees out against the band or your hand. Now we get to the fun part where we get to add weights. This is going to be a goblet squat. You can hold a kettlebell, you can hold a dumbbell. You want your clients holding this in front of them here, and we're just gonna do a body weight squat plus a little extra. The limiting factor here is going to be what they can hold, all right? So the biceps are going to determine how heavy we can take this goblet squat. I've done them up to 60 pounds. However, if we get to a 60-pound dumbbell, we probably need to be progressing into one of the ultimate tests of strength, the barbell back squat. Now, contrary to popular belief, this is a very, very advanced exercise. You see all kinds of people just jumping onto a barbell, wanting to squat, and I commend wanting to get stronger. However, we have to do it safely because you or someone else, your training partner, your spotters, anyone can get hurt doing this exercise, and we don't want to see you hurt, all right? So a couple things I want to mention first. You never, ever, ever want to back into a squat rack, okay? So you see the J-hooks are facing this way, the barbell comes out this way. I see a lot of people squatting like this and walking forward out of the squat rack, okay? You never ever want to do that. You always want to face that squat rack, okay? So if you're having to get rid of that barbell quickly, you don't have a spotter, you just step forward, put it on the J-hooks, and you're done, and you're safe, all right? Second, you never want to put this barbell on your cervical spine. I see a lot of people doing that as well. If you don't have the shoulder mobility to do a low bar back squat, you can do a high bar back squat, that's fine. You just have to make sure that it's resting on your God-given barbell rest, which is called your trapezius muscles, all right? So let's talk about how to set up for your squat. This is a 55-pound barbell, so you want to make sure if you're at a gym or somewhere you're not familiar with it, you're using a standard 45-pound barbell, or if you know it is a 55-pound barbell, factoring that in when you start loading the weight, because obviously that's going to make a difference. So how I set up for my squat, I put my hands where I know that I have the shoulder mobility and I'm comfortable. I'm going to center myself on the knurling on the bar, and I'm going to step under the barbell for a low bar back squat, center my feet so that the barbell is over my center of gravity. I'm going to sort of think about bending that barbell around, so I'm tightening my lats, packing my chin, and I'm going to stand up. As you can see, I'm only having to stand up about 2 inches to clear this barbell rack, okay? You don't want to have the bar so low that it's half of a squat to get out, and you don't want to have it so high that you have to stand on your tiptoes, all right? So bar height is super important. So once again, setting up, standing up, take 2 small steps back, set your feet, set the tension by pretending you have a piece of paper underneath your feet and you're trying to tear it, all right? So you're going to be pretending to abduct your femurs. Then a cue I like to use is opening the jars with your feet, so you're externally rotating the femurs. And then before you descend into your squat, you want to pretend that you're going to break a band around your knees. So I'm going to take a big breath in through my nose, and I'm going to stack my neck, pack my chin before I squat, and it looks like this. descending into the squat, locking out at the top, and walking it in. Now, if you hit the uprights, you should already be on top of the J hooks, all right? It never hurts to check, just to be sure. And those are the basics of a barbell back squat. Now, with a high bar squat, it's going to be more quad dominant because your barbell is going to be higher, which means your knees are probably going to travel more forward, okay? So let me show you what a high bar squat looks like. Resting on the traps, not on the cervical spine. And that is a high bar back squat. A great option if you have a client who doesn't have the shoulder mobility to barbell back squat, or if they just don't feel comfortable putting a barbell on their back, is the SSB bar. I've heard it called a shoulder saver bar. I've heard it called a safety squat bar. You're going to see a lot more of these popping up in commercial gyms. So it is worth knowing that this particular bar, the Elite FTS SSB yoke bar, is 65 pounds. Now there's several other brands. You want to check to make sure that you know the weight of the bar before you start loading it up or having your client squat with it, okay? So this bar is going to sit very, very high on your cervical spine. So we just talked about not putting the barbell there. This one has a significant amount of padding, so it is safe to put up higher, all right? And what this is going to feel like is more of a front squat or a high bar squat. And it's going to challenge your erectors and your upper back because naturally, just by the way that the weight is distributed and the barbell is made, is going to sit higher. So you're going to be challenging that upper back to stay upright. Okay, so I set up with this pretty much the same way I do with a regular barbell back squat, getting my barbell over my center of gravity, standing up, taking about 2 steps back. Set your feet. Now, if you pull the bar into you, more, you're going to be challenging your upper back and your erectors significantly more than if the handles are out here. It all depends on your goal, all right? So once again, I'm tearing the piece of paper, opening the jars, and I'm breaking the band as I go down into my squat. Now, at the bottom, you're going to feel like this is going to push you forward. Like I said, we're challenging the erectors and challenging the upper back by having to keep this weight from rounding us forward, all right? So this is going to be a more challenging yet different option for someone who, like I said, depending on your goals or if you don't have the shoulder mobility, the SSB is a great